All right, so buckle up, listeners, because today we're diving into AI and investing. We're talking about SoundHound AI. You know, the company that saw their stock price go up like 800% last
You're
year?
crazy.
Yeah, crazy. But things have gotten pretty interesting with SoundHound stock recently, and we're going to try to figure out exactly what's going on. We've got this awesome article here from the Motley Fool, and it's asking a very timely question. Is SoundHound AI still a buy?
Oh, it's a great question. And, to answer that, we really need to understand not only what's going on with SoundHound stock, but also all the other stuff happening behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit here. What happened to cause SoundHound stock to go on this wild ride?
Well, let's start with that 883% surge last year. That is seriously almost unheard of. It got a ton of attention. Investors are always looking for the next big thing in AI. But those gains were followed by a pretty big drop, 55% from the peak. And, obviously that raised some concerns.
Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic swing.
Yeah.
I can definitely see why people who put money into the company might be feeling a little nervous.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that contributed to that big decline?
Well, one factor is just like the bigger picture of what's going on in the economy. The Federal Reserve has been signaling about potential interest rate cuts coming in 2025. And that's made a lot of investors a bit more cautious, especially people who are invested in growth stocks. Companies like SoundHound.
So it's not only about SoundHound itself, but more like how investors are reacting to the bigger economic picture.
Yeah, exactly. But, there's another piece of this whole puzzle. A company called Nvidia, they make graphics cards. Well, Nvidia actually invested in SoundHound way back in 2017. It was part of a $75 million funding round. Nobody knew about this until a regulatory filing last year.
So Nvidia was like a silent partner there for a while.
Yeah.
And when that news finally came out, I bet it got people excited about SoundHound.
It definitely did. The fact that a huge player like Nvidia, they're famous for cutting-edge tech, was backing SoundHound, that was seen as a big vote of confidence. But here's where it gets really interesting. Nvidia recently said they're selling all of their stock in SoundHound.
Wait, so the same company that made the stock go up by investing is now pulling out completely? That's kind of a big deal, right?
It is a big deal, and SoundHound's stock fell almost 30% after that news came out. Now everybody's asking, does this mean Nvidia doesn't believe in SoundHound anymore?
Yeah, that's hard not to see it as a bad thing.
Well, it's important to remember that big companies like Nvidia, they manage really big investment portfolios, and the decisions they make are based on a lot of different things, not only their opinion of a single company.
Okay, so maybe it's not as simple as Nvidia just saying we don't believe in SoundHound anymore. What are some other reasons they might have decided to sell all their stock?
There are a few possibilities. It could be that they wanted to make their portfolio more balanced. Maybe they wanted to invest in something else that they thought would be more profitable. It could also be that they just saw a good chance to make a lot of money. Remember, they first invested back in 2017. And when SoundHound's stock went up so much, they probably made a really big profit.
Yeah, so it's like they're cashing in on their bet. But wouldn't that still mean that they don't think SoundHound stock will keep going up as fast?
Maybe, but we can't be totally sure unless we know what Nvidia is thinking. What we do know is that what Nvidia did has definitely changed how investors think about SoundHound. And that really matters in the stock market.
Right. Even if it wasn't about SoundHound's future, it still made a difference. So that brings us back to that Motley Fool article. Is SoundHound still a good buy? What else do we need to think about besides the ups and downs of their stock?
Right. To really understand if SoundHound is a good investment, we need to forget about all the stuff going on in the stock market and look at how the company is actually doing. How is their business doing, and what makes them different from all the other AI companies out there?
Okay, so let's talk about those things then. What's happening with SoundHound's business with all this stock market stuff going on?
Well, even though their stock has gone down recently, SoundHound actually had a really good third quarter of last year. They made more money than ever before. Their sales were 89% higher than the year before.
89%. That's incredible growth. What made them grow so much?
Part of it is that they're making money from different places now. Back in 2023, almost all of their money came from the car industry. So if something bad happened to the car industry, it would be bad for them too.
Yeah, it seems kind of risky to only get money from one place. So they've been trying to change that.
Exactly. Now they have customers in lots of industries: car companies, restaurants, financial services, healthcare, and insurance. Each one of those industries makes up between 5% and 25% of their total revenue. So it's much more balanced now.
That's awesome. So they're growing. And they're also in a better position to keep growing in the future. It sounds like they could be a big player in the whole voice AI thing that's happening.
That's a good way to put it. Trying to get customers in different industries is a smart move. It makes sense because more and more industries are using voice AI.
Okay, so they're growing really fast and getting customers in different industries. And they're in a market that has a lot of potential for growth. But I'm sure there are some challenges too, right?
Yeah, of course. There are always challenges. One of the biggest ones is that SoundHound isn't making a profit yet. They're spending a lot of money on research and development, which is important for any company in AI, but it also means that they're still losing money.
It's like that tough decision a lot of companies have to make. Spend money to grow or try to make a profit. It's tough, especially when you're competing against really big companies.
Yeah, and that leads us to another challenge competition. Everybody's getting into AI right now. SoundHound is going up against companies with tons of money and resources.
It's like David versus Goliath in the tech world. How are they going to stand out and compete against those giants?
That's a great question. To understand how they plan to do that, we need to talk about the technology they're using and what makes them special.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. What makes SoundHound's technology different and better than all the other companies out there? And how are they planning to use that to compete? Okay, so let's talk about that then. What makes SoundHound's technology different and better than all the other companies out there? And how are they planning to use that to compete?
One of the things that makes SoundHound really strong is that they know a lot about a specific area of AI. It's called natural language processing, or NLP. They've been working on it for more than 20 years, way before it became like the cool thing it is now.
So they're not just jumping on the AI bandwagon. They've been doing this for a while. But what exactly is NLP? And why is it so important for SoundHound?
You can think of NLP like the thing that connects human language with how computers understand things. It's what lets computers understand what we're saying or writing. It helps them make sense of all the little things that make human communication complicated.
So it's like teaching computers not just to hear words, but to actually understand what people mean.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really hard. You know, human language is full of stuff that can have different meanings, like idioms or words that mean different things depending on how they're used. It's not enough for computers to just recognize words. They need to understand how those words work together, what the speaker or writer is trying to say.
That sounds really hard. So how does SoundHound do NLP, and how is that different from their competitors?
The cool thing about SoundHound is that they built their own NLP engine. It's called deep meaning understanding. And it's different because it doesn't just look for keywords. It actually tries to figure out the meaning and intention behind what someone is saying.
So it's not just recognizing the word pizza. It's understanding that someone who says, "I want pizza," is actually hungry and wants to order food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really important if you want to make AI that can actually have a conversation with you. You know how annoying it is when you talk to those voice assistants and they just don't get what you're trying to say? SoundHound wants to fix that. They want to make AI that really understands us.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So knowing a lot about NLP is a big advantage. What else do they have going for them in this competitive market?
Well, they also have a bunch of patents and intellectual property. They've been creating new stuff in voice AI for years, and they've gotten patents for a lot of their breakthroughs. That gives them an edge over other companies because it protects their technology from being copied.
That's important. In the tech world, owning the technology is really powerful.
Right. And another interesting thing about SoundHound is that they want to be platform agnostic.
Platform agnostic. What's that?
It means that their technology can work on any device or operating system. It doesn't matter if it's a phone, a computer, or a smart speaker. They're not limited to just working with Apple or Google.
So they're saying they'll work with anybody. That's a bold move when you consider that some of their biggest competitors control entire ecosystems.
It is a bold move, but it could be a really good thing. It means they could reach a lot more customers. If their technology can work on anything, then they're not limited to the people who use a specific platform.
That makes sense. What are the downsides of doing it that way?
I guess the biggest downside is that they need to convince a lot of different companies to use their technology. They need to build relationships with car companies, phone makers, app developers, all kinds of companies. And that takes time, and it can be complicated.
So it's not enough to just have good technology. They need to be good at business and working with other companies too.
Exactly. And that's a whole different set of skills.
Okay, so we've talked about what SoundHound does well. Their knowledge of NLP, their patents, and their platform agnostic approach. But every company has weaknesses, right? What are some things that SoundHound needs to improve on to really succeed?
Well, like we talked about before, they're not making a profit yet. And that's a big problem for investors. Investors want to see that the companies they're putting money into are actually making money.
Yeah, it's one thing to have cool technology and a lot of potential. But eventually, you have to show that you can actually turn that into profit.
Exactly. And while it's great that their sales are going up, they need to figure out a way to make a profit. They need to show investors that they can do that. And they need to make sure they can keep growing without spending more money than they're making.
So they can't just grow. They have to grow in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the challenge of competing against those giant tech companies with all the money. Those companies have so many resources and so many users,
Yeah.
and they're putting voice AI into everything they make.
It must be hard to compete against Google and Amazon when they're already such a big part of our lives.
It's definitely not easy. SoundHound needs to find ways to be different. They need to find something that they're really good at that those big companies can't easily copy.
So they need to be smart, not just about the technology they make, but also about who their customers are and who they work with.
Absolutely. They need to pick their battles and focus on the areas where they can actually make a difference.
Okay, so we talked about SoundHound's strengths, their weaknesses, and who they're competing with. Now, what about opportunities? Where do you think SoundHound has the best chance to grow and expand?
I think focusing on specific industries is a good strategy. They've picked out some important ones like cars, restaurants, and healthcare, where voice AI can really change how people use technology.
It makes sense to focus on areas where voice interaction is a natural fit.
Exactly. For example, imagine being able to control everything in your car with your voice. The radio, the navigation, the temperature, everything. SoundHound is already working with some big car companies to make that happen.
That's pretty cool. And restaurants, too. I can see how voice AI could be helpful there.
Yeah, think about ordering your food by just talking to your table. SoundHound's technology can make that happen. It would make things easier and faster for customers and for the restaurant workers.
That's a good example of how voice AI can make everyday things better. What about healthcare?
There are a lot of exciting things they could do in healthcare. Imagine medical devices that you can control with your voice, or virtual assistants that can help doctors and nurses find information and keep track of patients.
Those are some really cool applications. So it seems like SoundHound is really focused on using voice AI to make a difference in the real world.
Yeah, and those are just a few examples. As voice technology gets better, we'll probably see even more creative ways to use it.
Okay, we talked about SoundHound's strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. Let's finish up this part of our deep dive by talking about threats. What are some things that could hurt SoundHound's progress?
Well, one of the biggest challenges for any tech company, especially one that's working on AI, is that the tech world is always changing. New things are being invented all the time. People change their minds about what they want, and sometimes big changes happen really fast.
That's true. It's a tough industry to be in. Companies have to be able to adapt to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. And for a company like SoundHound, they have to keep investing in research and development. They have to try new things, and they have to be ready for whatever's next.
So they have to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
What other threats do they face?
Another big one is government regulations. As voice AI becomes more common, there are going to be more rules about data privacy, security, and ethics.
That's important. It's not just about the technology. It's about making sure it's used in a responsible way.
Right. SoundHound needs to be thinking about those things. They need to build trust with their users, and they need to show that they're using voice data in a way that's safe and ethical.
So it's a really complex and constantly changing world. And SoundHound needs to be smart, strategic, and ethical to succeed. They have a lot of good things going for them, but they also have some big challenges.
It's the story of a lot of companies.
And that's what makes it so interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. But let's not forget about the bigger picture here. SoundHound is just one part of a much bigger story, the story of artificial intelligence.
That's what's so great about doing a deep dive like this. We start with one topic, but we always end up talking about bigger ideas.
It reminds us that even with so much information out there,
The best way to understand something is to connect all the dots.
so let's step back for a second and think about what voice AI means for all of us.
That's a big question. We're just starting to figure that out.
On the one hand, voice AI has the potential to make our lives easier and more connected. Imagine being able to control all our devices with our voices and get information instantly.
That would be amazing. But there are also some things to be worried about. What happens when computers get too good at understanding us? How do we make sure that voice AI is used in a way that's good for everyone?
It's like opening a box that has both good and bad things inside.
Yeah, we're creating something really powerful. but we need to be careful about how we use it.
That's why it's so important to talk about these things, to explore both the good and the bad sides of AI.
And to think about how we can make sure it helps people.
You know, it's funny, we started this deep dive by looking at one company, SoundHound,
Mm-hmm.
but we've realized that their story is just a small part of a much bigger story.
That's true. And as we keep learning about the world, I'm sure we'll keep coming back to these ideas about AI and the future of technology.
Absolutely. It's a story that's still being written, and we're all part of it. Both exciting and a little scary to think about.
It is, but that's why it's so important to stay informed and to think critically about how these new technologies will affect us.
Well said. And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. We've looked at how the AI world works, talked about what different companies are doing, and thought about the bigger ethical and societal questions. We hope we've given you more questions than answers, and that you're curious to learn even more.
That's what we want, because there's always more to learn.
And on that note, this is the end of our deep dive into SoundHound AI and artificial intelligence. Thanks for listening.
It was great to be here. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.
You know, we've talked a lot about how voice AI could change everything, but it's good to remember that there are real companies behind all of this. So let's get back to talking about SoundHound and Nvidia. They're pretty different, right? One's a startup and the other is like this huge tech giant. But their stories are actually connected in some interesting ways.
That's true. When you think about it, Nvidia makes those super powerful GPUs. And those GPUs are like the foundation that a lot of AI is built on.
So they're like the ones building the tools that companies like SoundHound need to create new stuff.
Yeah, exactly. AI needs a lot of computing power to work. It uses these complicated algorithms and huge amounts of data. And without powerful hardware like what Nvidia makes, it would be really hard and expensive. SoundHound wouldn't be able to do what they do without the technology that Nvidia is making.
So even though Nvidia might not be making voice assistants or self-driving cars themselves, their technology is still a big part of why those things are possible.
Exactly. They're like the backbone of the whole AI industry. And that's why it's so interesting that they decided to sell all their stock in SoundHound. It makes you think, are they changing their plans for AI?
Yeah, it does make you wonder. Do you think maybe they're moving away from investing in specific AI companies and focusing more on being the company that provides the infrastructure for AI?
Maybe. Or maybe they see other opportunities out there. Maybe there are different types of AI or specific industries where they think they can do more.
That makes sense. It shows that even in tech, where everything changes so fast, it's still really important to have a plan.
Yeah, definitely. And for companies like SoundHound, it's really important to figure out how to work with those big tech companies, but also how to stand out on their own.
It's like they need to find a balance. They need the power and resources of companies like Nvidia, but they also need to be different and do their own thing.
Right. And if they can do that,
Yeah,
they could be really successful.
they really could. And like we said, it seems like they're in a good position to benefit from all the excitement around voice AI. They've got the technology, the people, and the ambition. But there will be some tough times ahead too, right?
Oh, definitely. There are always challenges. That's just part of being a company.
But those challenges are what make it so interesting to see what happens next.
Exactly. That's what makes AI so fascinating. There's so much potential, but we're not sure exactly what will happen. It's a reminder that we're living in a time when technology is changing everything so fast, and it's changing how we live our lives.
It's a pretty amazing time to be alive. And that's why it's so important to talk about these things, to do these deep dives, and to really think about the impact technology will have.
Absolutely. That's why we do what we do. We want to make you curious and encourage you to keep learning. After all, the future of AI is being decided right now, and we all have a role to play in figuring out what that future will look like.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, from what companies are doing to how voice AI will affect society. It's clear that this is just the beginning of the voice AI revolution. And we're excited to see what happens next.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions.